Well, welcome back to the Nobody Asked podcast. This is episode 18. Today it is just me, Maya, by myself. Ariana is at school, and today I'm just going to be by myself doing a solo episode for you guys. Lately, I have had a spark of creativity and want to share my story a little bit more because we do a lot of sharing of other athletes' stories, but I realized I never really shared my own personal story. So if anybody out there cares or is, wanting to know a little bit more about my story and my journey of being a student athlete, this is the episode for you. But I just want to set a little disclaimer before we dive into it that there are some topics that can be sensitive to some people or triggering to some. So I just want to put that warning out there in regards to mental health. That being said, though, welcome back to the podcast where we ask the questions that nobody really asks. My name is Mya Falcon, and here we go. Roll the intro music. It's good to hear that intro music. It's been a while, but I'm glad to be back. Hopefully I can get back with Ariana soon. But where do I even start? So I guess I start with the beginning, obviously. I've been an athlete my whole life. I started out playing soccer, and I played at a pretty high level up until I was about 12 years old. And in 2014, I joined the Ajax swimming club because I always loved being in the water. And I always had this special touch for the water, so I thought, why not try competitive swimming? And I did. And so I joined in 2014, and I caught a lot of people, including myself and my parents, by surprise. I climbed the ranks pretty quickly, and the way that the Ajax Swimming Club was set up was that there were groups split up by skill, speed, and age, and I made my way through a bunch of groups pretty quickly just because of how fast I was progressing. And by 2015, I had made the top group, which was called the elite group, which had some of the fastest people in Canada. And I got to train next to them, which was pretty cool. So you could say I was doing pretty well at the time. Unfortunately, in 2016, the club shut down due to unforeseen circumstances. And I was forced, along with all my other teammates, to find a new club mid-season, which is something really difficult to do. And it was a hard time for all of us. But right before that, I had actually been ID'd as an athlete with national team potential by Swimming Canada. So my times were being recognized by other people, and I was starting to, make a name for myself in the world of swimming. After almost quitting because I didn't really want to find a new club, I was being a little bit dramatic at the time, I found the North York Aquatic Club, who so kindly brought me and some of my other teammates in. They gave us a home when we didn't have one, so that's something that I'll forever be grateful for. My coach, Murray Drudge, who unfortunately has passed away, played a really big part in my swim career, and you'll see in the upcoming podcast, in the episode, why that is. But shout out Murray Drudge and Eddie Toro for, being there when we had nothing really. Before I moved to Nyack, I actually broke my foot. I broke my 5th metatarsal. We were doing dry land, and I landed awkwardly, and unfortunately, suffered that injury. So I already kind of had the taste of what it was like to miss big competitions, miss out on training due to injury, which was quite unfortunate, but I was in for a ride. If I thought that was hard, I was in for a ride for these next few injuries that I had to deal with. All that being said, I'm now settled at Nyack with some of my old teammates, and I'm meeting new teammates, and we're just having a really good time. And Murray and Eddie have been great. They've welcomed us in. But then unfortunately, I started to develop some sort of really weird ankle pain. I kind of just brushed it off for a little bit, thinking that it was just because I was tired. But when it became a more consistent feeling, I did what any athlete would do, and that was inform my coaches and my parents to see what we could do to try and fix it. I went to a physiotherapist who initially thought it was just a strength and stability issue within my ankle. Because with the constant kicking you do in swimming, she just thought that there wasn't enough strength in the muscles and the tendons or whatever. I'm not too sure how to explain it, but that's essentially the idea was that it just wasn't as strong enough as it needed to be to do what I needed to do in training. So she gives me a bunch of exercises to work through, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. They're going really well. But unfortunately, I don't see any changes over the next few months, and I'm getting a little bit frustrated at this point because all I'm doing is pull, which for those of you who don't know, pull is just swimming with your arms. So I wasn't training to my full potential, really. I eventually got referred to a second physiotherapist who actually worked with the Canadian Ballet. So she was really experienced in the ankle area, if that sounds kind of weird, but she was really experienced in that area because ballet dancers are always pointing their feet. Similarly to how you do when swimming, when you're kicking, your feet are actually pointed, and that's when I would feel the sharp ankle pain. At this point, I had also gone through some imaging and stuff like x-rays and MRIs and stuff like that, and we had actually established that there was some extra bone growth in my ankle, and there was some bone-on-bone action going on, which was causing that really, really, really irritating pinching pain. So a plan was established that I was going to do treatment with this new physiotherapist, and I would actually commute really far to get to these appointments. I would take a bus from Ajax to Scarborough, and then I would subway from Scarborough to Toronto a couple times a week in the summer just to get to these appointments. And sometimes my parents would drive me there and back, so you could really say I was doing the most to really try and, figure out this injury and what was going on with the ankles and really try and subside the pain. So by now it's 2017, I've gone into a new swim season with this injury, and we're really just trying to fight through it, really. I'm training through it at this point and doing all the treatment that I can to try and make it as best as I can. I'm starting to get I'm already frustrated and, a little annoyed at all of this because all I want to do is train so that I can perform and meet my goals, but this ankle injury was kind of getting in the way of that. In 2017, I was lucky enough to attend the Canada Summer Games and was team captain of Team Ontario. Team Ontario did really, really well at this meet. Unfortunately, I didn't swim as good as I had hoped just because of the ankle injuries and, the modified training. Things weren't really going my way this season. I was lucky enough to make the team. I was really, really lucky and even luckier to be team captain, something I'm forever grateful for and will cherish for the rest of my life. But I definitely didn't perform the way that I was hoping. So after the summer of 2017 and after the games, I actually unfortunately decided that I needed to switch clubs. I had a great time at NIAC, and I've built relationships with coaches and friends that will last me my whole life, but I decided to move to the Ontario Swim Academy. Here I was able to get a little more medical attention and a little more help for these injuries that I was experiencing and just a little bit more training on both sides of being in the pool and in the weight room. I was lucky enough that the Ontario Swim Academy actually had a doctor on site that I could see, and when I told him about the ankle injuries and everything that we had done up to this point to try and subside the pain, the only thing left was surgery, unfortunately, and the surgery would be to go in to my ankle and cut off that extra bone growth so that there's no more bone-on-bone action. Good news is that we had a plan and that I was pretty confident that this surgery was going to work because it was a pretty, clear-cut idea what needed to happen. The bad news is that this was something I was experiencing in both ankles and could only do one procedure at a time, so it was going to take a little bit to get done. So I had the first surgery done in October 2017, and I came out of it really healthy, really good, really happy, it went really well, and I was able to get in the water to just swim with only arms for a little bit once the stitches came out. And then came January, where I had my second surgery on my left ankle. Going into these, I was really positive because I was really happy that we finally had a solid plan to really get things going and, maybe I could finally get rid of this ankle injury. And there was still hope for me to be able to swim pretty fast at the upcoming meets in the spring. Something I was pretty happy with, you could say. I felt like being positive was the least I could do in this situation because I had all these coaches and all this medical staff really helping me, doing the most to really help me get through this injury, and I had everything that I could have ever asked for, so being positive was the least thing that I could do in this situation. So we fast forward a little bit, things are going really well, training's going well, I was able to race at trials in the spring and everything. I didn't swim as fast as I had hoped, but I swam decent for the given situation, and things were going really well. No more of that pinching feeling in my ankles, which is a really, really good sign, something I was really happy about. But unfortunately, around, I want to say May or June, I started to experience this really weird pain in my elbow. And I used to only feel it on Saturday practices. And we used to have really long and hard Saturday practices, so I figured it was just, the end of the week, my body is tired and I just needed a break, and I just figured that's what it was. But then the pain started to carry on throughout the week, and I started to feel it a little bit more. It was almost like a really sharp and pins and needle pain that I would feel in my elbow. I started to feel it when doing push-ups, started to feel it when just doing regular swimming. And honestly, I was pretty upset because I had just got through these ankle injuries, and now there was another injury knocking at my door. And I was just kind of thinking to myself, like, why? What did I do to deserve this? Like, I work hard, I do everything that I can, and, I was just frustrated. I'm going to say that word a lot in this podcast, frustrated, but there's no other way for me to explain it other than frustrated. So I tell my coaches and everything, and we get some medical attention on it, but we can't quite figure out what it is. The only thing that had been established was that there was something wrong with the nerve in my elbow. So when you hit your funny bone, you don't actually hit the bone, you hit the nerve, which causes that really weird feeling. So there was something wrong with that nerve for me. I was eventually diagnosed with something called thoracic outlet syndrome by one doctor that I had seen, but the treatment for that was really just, massage, exercises, warming it up before training and everything like that. So we went along with that, but unfortunately that didn't work, and I was still experiencing some really, really, really uncomfortable feelings. Like, I don't really know how to explain it, but I was starting to lose feeling in some of my hand. I would feel it during regular day-to-day life, and it got pretty bad. So at this point, I'm just really, really upset. I had gotten through these ankle injuries, and now there's another injury that I have to deal with, and all I want to do is just train normally, and I want to do what everyone else is doing, and I want to be able to reach my goals. But in order to do that, I have to be able to train, and I felt like I wasn't getting a fair chance at that. My coaches, Don Burton and Amber Hutchinson, were really supportive during all of this. They would modify the practices so that it would take some stress off my elbow and everything like that. So shout out those two if you're listening to this. Nonetheless, though, through it all, I just tried to stay positive. I felt like, again, it was the least I could do because I had everything that I could have ever needed or wanted. And so I just kind of kept my head down and just kept pushing through it, doing what I had to do, like my exercises and everything like that, recovery, and doing all the necessary things to try and subside this pain. So this is the summer of 2018, like around June. So I decided to take the summer completely off from swimming to see if rest would really help the nerve calm down. Unfortunately, when I hopped in for my first practice in the fall, I immediately felt the pain again, and it had not gone away. I remember crying in my goggles the whole practice because I was so excited to get back in the water finally and really hoping that this pain had gone away, but I felt it the whole time, and I immediately felt it too. Like, it wasn't something that gradually came. I felt it right away. So again, I'm super frustrated, and I don't know what to do anymore because I just wanted this swim season to be normal for once. And I was starting to get really upset, and it started to really affect my day-to-day life, and I would think about it all the time and how upset I was over it. But eventually, one of the doctors from the Ontario Swim Academy suggested that I get an ulnar nerve transposition, which is essentially just moving the location of the nerve to a more comfortable spot where it's not as irritated. And at this point, I had said, I've had 2 surgeries on my ankles. What is one more on my elbow to really get this out of the way? So in January of 2019, I had the surgery after I had done anything and everything you can think of. We tried before this surgery to try and really get rid of the pain. Like, we even did a nerve conduction test, and that didn't work, or that didn't show anything for us. So surgery was really the last option, and we went through with it. And I came out of it really healthy. I was happy. I was hopeful. I was positive. It went as good as anyone would have hoped for. And when I woke up from the surgery, they actually told me that when they saw the nerve, it was beat up. It was swollen, and it was really, really bad. So I guess opening up my elbow was a good thing because they were able to see that truly there was a problem, and hopefully that this would be the solution to what I was feeling, and that all that feeling of numbness and tingling and pain would just go away after, obviously the few weeks post-op. So of course, you don't have a surgery without going through more physio and stuff like that afterwards. I was out of the water for a little bit, but I would do my cardio on a bike. I would still go to practice and do weights where I could, do lower body stuff. And my coaches were amazing through all of this, even back with the ankle injuries. They were just so supportive and so amazing in modifying practices for me and making me feel as included as possible and feeling as trained as I could be. So at this point, I'm back training. I've done my physio. I'm still doing physio and everything like that. But unfortunately, this pain will just not go away. It comes back even after the surgery. I haven't highlighted too much how I've been feeling throughout this whole process, but you really start to feel lonely through it all. Injuries as an athlete can be very, very lonely, really hard too. Some of the hardest things that I've ever had to encounter. But at this point, I was really starting to get hopeless because nothing was working. Not even surgery had worked, and I was really upset, like really, really upset. Yeah. Whew. I started to get helpless. I was really, really helpless, and this started to become more than swimming at this point. Sorry. I started to hate swimming, like really hate it, and it sucked because that was my escape. Swimming was my thing. Like, I was Mya the swimmer, which is why I think we highlight so much on this podcast that you're more than what your sport is. But at this point in my life, I didn't know that. Swimming really started to become a trigger for me. I would cry at practice in my goggles, making sure no one would know. I would cry after practice, before practice. And at this point, I was still going to school full time. I was training full time. I had a job. So things were really crazy. And just to add this on top of everything was really, really hard for me. Looking back on it, I definitely was hiding from it all and was really, really putting on a face, especially in front of my teammates, because I didn't want them to know I was struggling, because they already saw that I was struggling with my injury, so I was struggling physically, but I really didn't want them to see that I was struggling mentally, just because it was really hard. Yeah. I didn't feel strong at all. I felt really weak, both physically and mentally. Physically because I wasn't training the best that I could, and mentally just because all of this was so draining, and I was so sick and tired of being the kid with the injury, the kid doing the different set, and just the one that there was always a problem with this person. There was always a problem with me, and I hated that. I really started to not feel like myself. I really felt disassociated with who I was, and I didn't like where I was with life, and I really hated a lot of things at this time. I truly felt lost, and I didn't feel like myself whatsoever. So at this point, we're around the springtime of 2019, and we did our trials meet, and I did pretty poorly, just, given the circumstances. And then we went to another competition in Quebec City, where my team and I actually stayed in a pretty big Airbnb because there was a lot of us, so we needed a lot of space. But I remember after one night of competing, I pulled my coach aside, and I just broke down. I explained to him that I hated swimming, and truthfully, it wasn't my intention to break down, but I think I was just at such a low point that it just came about, and that's what had happened. Nothing was getting better. All I wanted to do was work hard and train super hard so I could reach my goals, and I felt like I couldn't have that because of this elbow injury, and it just started to become really unfair for me, and I was really, really upset, and I told Don, I don't like swimming anymore. I can't do it anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. And yeah, and as a coach, I think he was pretty upset as well. Our team manager was actually also there for the talk, Karen. We called her our momager because she did so much for us as a team, and something I'm forever grateful for. But during this talk, both Don and Karen were super supportive, and eventually we devised a plan that we were gonna, keep a better look at my mental health and how I was doing and feeling during training and everything like that going into the summer, and that's what we did. But unfortunately, nothing got better physically and mentally. Things only just really got worse. Luckily, through the Ontario Swim Academy, I actually had access to a psychologist, Dr. Judy Goss. Shout out, Judy. And when it was my turn to speak with her, I kind of had a repeat of what had happened with Dawn. I just broke down again because I was down so bad that I couldn't even control my emotions and that they just came out just how they were just pure raw emotions that just came out of me. This is the first time we actually established or really thought that I was suffering from depression throughout all of this. Judy thought that I was just in a whole different kind of state of mood and just well-being, that I probably had depression. I needed to seek some medical help, and that was the advice that she had given me. At the same time, we actually had a provincial competition coming up, so what Judy had said was that I was going to go into provincials with no expectations and just race, and just try and have fun as much as I could despite what I was feeling, and just do what I could. I was then going to take the whole summer off again just to take a break from swimming because like I said, swimming was becoming a trigger, and I needed a break from that trigger to see if I could get back to a good place with swimming. So I went through provincials, did quite mediocre, and I took the summer off and sought help for my mental health and really took a physical break for once. And at this point, my mental health is really, really suffering. It's really, really bad. I didn't really want to live anymore, and I think that was the first time I admitted it, was to Judy. And that was really hard for me because I think I had been feeling like that for a really long time, but it was the first time I had said it out loud. And I think that was part of the reason that I really, really broke down. Through all of this and how I'm feeling, I'm still going to school, I'm still training as hard as I can, and I'm doing all these things, and it's just become really, really draining. And it got to a point where I couldn't even make the decision for myself. People around me had to decide, okay, Mya, you need to take the summer off because you are not doing well. And they had to make the decision for me. At this point, I'm in grade 11, and I'm starting to miss out on scholarships, and, I'm starting to really look at my post-secondary career, and I'm not getting the offers that I was hoping, and just because my times were suffering due to this injury, and that was just another thing that was making me really, really upset over the summer and everything like that. But I decided to just put that on hold for a little bit and really take the summer to just focus on my mental health and really try and recover from everything that's been going on. My biggest fear with being forced to take the summer off was that I was going to lose my spot at the Ontario Swim Academy, because you had to be a certain speed and fast enough to be on the team, right? And I was scared that if I took the summer off that I was going to lose my spot on the team, but I did it anyways, and I just took the break that I needed. So around comes the fall after I've taken my break, when the swimming season is starting to vamp up again, and I just didn't feel quite ready. So I texted Don and saying, hey, I think I need a few more weeks off. Is that okay? And he said, yeah, of course. So I took those few weeks off just to, get back into the role of school and everything like that. And when I was ready, Don suggested that I do a few practices on my own just to get back into the swing of things before joining the team, and which I did. And unfortunately, I never made it back to the Ontario Swim Academy. At this point, wow, that is a big wave of emotions. At this point, I had lost my times. My times had expired, and I didn't have the qualifying times to get into the Ontario Swim Academy, which was my biggest fear. That was my fear of taking the summer off, and that's what had happened. And as part of my language, as shitty as I was already feeling, this just kind of really capitalized it. But I talked to my parents, and we devised a plan that I was going to go back to the North York Aquatic Club, who was more than welcoming to have me back, and, pick up my times, and then hopefully make my way back to the Ontario Swim Academy with Dawn. But to be honest with you, I just couldn't do it. I remember there was one practice, and it was my last practice. I didn't know it was going to be my last practice, but it was, and it just got to a point where I just physically and mentally could not do it anymore, and I just broke down. I wasn't even in the water yet, and I looked at the practice and I just started crying because I couldn't do it anymore. I really, really couldn't. I physically, mentally, any sort of way, I just could not do it. I honestly think it was a mix of frustration, anger, jealousy, and just overall tiredness of having to deal with all of this, both physically and mentally. Looking back on it, I think what had happened was that I was just not totally healed, in any aspect and wasn't in any position to go back to swimming, and I think I set myself up for a little bit of disappointment. But at the same time, I understand why I went back, because I was in grade 12, it was my last year, I had, times to pick up, and I had these goals. But nonetheless, that was unfortunately my last practice, and my swimming career ended there. You might be wondering, what am I doing now when it comes to swimming and just life in general? Right now, I am just working. I took a year off school just because I wasn't feeling the whole online school thing. But honestly, I'm still kind of left with an empty pit in my stomach. I'm really unsatisfied with the result of my swimming career, but what I am satisfied with is all the work that I put in. I really did everything I could to really try and, revamp my swim career, try and get rid of these injuries. I did everything that I possibly could. But I guess just sometimes it just doesn't work out the way that we always want it to, but things always work out the way that they should. I'm a strong believer that things happen for a reason, and am I still trying to find out why that all of that happened and why my swimming career turned out the way it did? Yeah, I am. But I just have to accept it and, just see where the wind takes me now and just keep going with life. You just got to keep going. Throughout this whole process, or this whole experience, I've experienced, God, how many times can I say the word experience? But anyways, throughout this whole experience, I've really felt a lot of emotions through it all. And some ones that I really wanted to highlight in this episode were jealousy, loss, grief, frustration, loneliness, anger, guilt, because any emotion you're ever feeling is always 100% valid. Jealousy can be a very toxic emotion, but it was something that I was really, really feeling throughout this whole thing, because I was watching all my friends, my brothers, be able to do the sport they loved when I felt like I was almost robbed of that opportunity. And that kind of coincides with the frustration, was that I was really, frustrated with how things were playing out and how anything and everything that I was doing wasn't working. I still, to this day, feel a little bit of grief and loss when it comes to swimming, but grief is something that we all do at our own pace, and you can't rush it. I'm trying to refine that love for swimming again. It's a little bit hard with COVID, with everything shut down, but I do swim often when I can on my own. And I also feel a little sense of guilt too, because I almost feel guilty for feeling jealous, because jealous is a really strong, powerful, and can be toxic emotion. But at the same time, I can't be so hard on myself for these kinds of things, because they're the feelings that I'm feeling and I can't push them away. If there's anything you take away from this episode, well, there's actually a few things that you could take away from it, but one is being that anything you're doing currently can end in an instant. And I think that's something that I now use in my daily life to appreciate every single moment, because it can be taken away from you at any point and you will have no idea. Like my swimming career, I had no idea that was going to be my last practice, or back when I was able to train normally, I never knew that I was never going to be able to train the same again. And it may sound like a little dramatic, but truthfully, I don't have any better way to put it other than to just appreciate every single moment and everything that you're doing. For athletes, the next time that you think to yourself that you don't want to do this practice, or that you hate what your coach has written up for you, I really want you to think about how you would feel if swimming was taken away from you. Because now I'm dealing with life after swimming and as a retired athlete, and that's a whole other battle. We've done episodes on being a retired athlete, and, it's a really hard thing to overcome and to deal with, because you put so much time and effort into the sport that all of a sudden when you don't have it anymore, you can feel a little bit lost. So what I'm trying to say is just appreciate every single moment and really try and embrace it as much as you can. The other thing I want you to take away from this episode is that you are never alone, and you should never have to put on a face to pretend you're feeling a way that you're not. Your feelings are always, always valid, and they always matter. Emotions aren't something you can just push aside. You have to be able to feel them, you have to recognize them, and then find ways to cope with them. And I think that's something that I didn't do a very good job at, and, looking back on it, I wish I had looked for help a little sooner, because maybe things would have turned out differently. But here I am now, doing my thing, and hopefully I can pass along the message that you should never feel like you have to hide your emotions or that your emotions are invalid, because they always are, and they 100% always will be. I think a lot of this is about accepting what had happened with swimming for me, and really just trying to love myself and, not be so hard on myself for the way that things turned out, but also that there's more to life to swimming. And it still sucks, and it still really hurts that, I didn't get to accomplish my goals, for example, like collegiate swimming, or even the really big goal, which was to make it to the Olympics. But at the same time, there's more to life than swimming, and I've started to realize that and find other things that I have potential in and, a passion for. And I think that's really important for anybody that's in sport, whether you're an athlete or a parent of the sport, that at the end of the day, it's just a sport. And you might be saying, oh, she's just saying that because she didn't, succeed, or she didn't reach her goals. But truthfully, at the end of the day, it's just a sport, and there's so much more to life than the sport itself. Because we say it all the time on this podcast, but you are not bigger than the sport, and there are things that are way bigger than the sport that are much more important. All that being said, I am currently finding a way to wrap up this podcast. But seriously, I want to thank you for sitting through this episode and listening to me blabber on about my swim career, and how, sometimes things aren't always as good as they seem for some people, and that emotions are valid, and that help is usually right under your nose. That first initial ask is always the hardest, but I promise you it will change your life. So if you or anyone you know is struggling, please reach out to us, to hotlines, to someone you trust. There's always someone that's out there to help. And mental health is so important, especially nowadays, and I can't express enough how important it is, because when my mental health really took a toll, it changed my life for the worse. And it's something I still live with to this day. Am I much better? Absolutely, I'm doing a lot better now, but it's still something that I have to live with. So please reach out for help, check in on your friends, and do the best you can to just always be kind, because you never know what's going on with somebody behind the scenes. But that brings us to the end of this podcast. Again, thank you so much for listening. I would love to hear what you guys think about this episode, and if you liked it, or if you have any questions for me, I would love to follow up on that. You can reach out to me on Instagram. You can reach out through the pod Instagram. You can email us. Ariana and I are probably going to do a follow-up episode on this, where she's going to ask me some questions and do a little interview with me. But I would love to hear your feedback on this episode. But all that being said, thank you for listening to the podcast where we ask the questions that nobody really asks. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you. Bye.